Okay, so what did I want to say today? Right. Key thing that I wanted to have a look at was this is the picture of the new neuroscience book. My co-author Tibby's not entirely sure they've got the right title, but anyway, I'm going with Neuroscience for Change. But anybody who's ever worked at the publishing company knows you don't always get to see these things. Um, a few things. The source for all of this webinar, and in fact, there is a symbiotic relationship between the course, the 2-day course that is absolutely nailing it. People love it. The feedback is brilliant. So that has obviously fed the book, but the book is obviously feeding the course, and it's feeding this webinar. What I was saying about the additional webinar I'm going to do in 4 weeks' time about sponsorship for neuroscience is going to be that this book, I think, is going to kick off quite a few different courses in neuroscience, because already, I mean, I've written another section in this book which is all about how we can use the activities from neuroscience into our change plans, and I do think that that will be that's likely to turn itself into a very practical 2-day course. So if you haven't done the Neuroscience for Change course as it is at the moment, this will become the foundation level for all the other courses that are to come. So if you haven't done it, speak to Marlene in the chat, because she's the one controlling everything, and I know she's managing all of the bookings for the 30th of April and the 1st of May course that we're doing. We haven't got that many courses, so you do have to sort of fight for a place, simply because Tibby and I are so busy and we co-train it. So you can imagine trying to bring our calendars together to find those opportunities. But I strongly suggest that you get on that course. The thing that I have found from the feedback, and the feedback is from major corporates, government departments, the third sector, individual contractors and consultants, all of them have said the same thing. Wow, I have left this course with a whole notebook of activities that I want to start doing. And I've just this minute come out of a meeting where we are talking about the techniques, some of which I'm going to show in this webinar, being used by a major organization that has just acquired another firm that is half the size of them. So they are going to become, 1.5 times their size over the summer. And they're using an awful lot of these things to do it. So that's my first point. I'm going to look at current models and why I think that what we're talking about with neuroscience is so important. I'm going to talk about new thinking, because the current models bother me, and I will explain why. And then I'm going to give you some techniques, because you know me, I like to give you practical stuff. You've given up an hour of your time to all of those live today, but also all of those who are listening to the recording. I want to make sure that you've got something practical to walk away with. So I've just put up this slide. It's a range of current models that we all know. Top right there is, really the picture of the Kubler-Ross and Adam Hazen-Hobson sort of work, where we talk about the emotions that people go through in change. Now, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross never intended to be working on a change management life cycle model, but that's how her work from the 1950s, 1960s has been used. But what delights me for her, although she's long dead, is the fact that her work has been validated by the latest magnetic imaging that we can do as part of neuroscience now. So these emotions, these models still hold true. They are useful background. I'm never going to say that knowing these is a waste of time. Absolutely not. I think it gives really good background. The ADCAR model sort of sums up, key steps in this life cycle. Bottom right, I am absolutely a fan of Bridges. Professor William Bridges is also dead now, but what he had to say about the emotional and psychological transition from sort of mourning the end of how we currently do things, experimenting, and then sort of learning how we're going to do things in the future, still incredibly useful. I think there's a lot of insight there. I've never particularly got on with Kotter's 8 steps. I find them a little pedestrian myself, but I know that many of my teams do enjoy the fact that we can sort of break down their change plan, if you like, into 8 sort of discrete steps that they have to take. I find the competency model, and I often replace the word competence with confidence, I find that quite helpful in quickly summarizing how people might feel in change. these are all great models. They're all really useful. The thing that concerns me is that these models tend to reflect how I'm experiencing a particular change. But I think we all know, don't we, that we're dealing with multiple continuous change. The call I've just been in, somewhere in the Middle East, made my hair curl. The amount of change, I feel breathless and overwhelmed just listening to it. The 400 people that I am coaching through this situation, I am very empathetic towards how it feels. And I think what we recognize is that people feel like they're on shifting sands. They may well be having some of these emotions, but they might be having different emotions at different times based on different changes. You know, the way I've always drawn it is a very simple diagram like this, where I think, well, actually, there's multiple transition curves happening at any one time. And with 400 people I'm talking about at the moment, I'm sort of trying to draw a line through where we are now at the end of quarter 1 and go, well, look, we've sort of finished that change. We're in the middle of that change. We're about to start this change, and just give them a sort of sense of, this is what we've achieved so far. This is what we've still got to do. It's interesting, isn't it, that as a change professional, an awful lot of what I'm doing is signposting. This is where we are right now. You know, I'm just trying to help them understand this is the experience I think you're having. And that's just a scheduling issue about the different changes that are taking place. My concern is that I can't then say, well, you're in denial for one change, but you're in experimentation with another, and you're in anger with another one. It doesn't work like that. The human brain does not work like that. So over the last few years, the more I have studied, the more I have realized that perhaps this model here gives us a bit more of a clue. I show this in a lot of my webinars now, because I think obviously the course we go over lots and lots of activities, but I think it's a good starting point to give me a sense of, well, actually, it doesn't matter which change I'm on. It doesn't matter the reasons why. Today, I might be more in the threat response, where my brain is going, for whatever reason, whatever changes have happened, my brain is going, no, I'm very anxious. I don't think I can really engage with this. And other times, for all sorts of different reasons, my brain is much more in the reward space, where positive psychology really, it describes this very well, where I am very open, where I'm feeling excited by the opportunities, and that I'm actually sort of experimenting and trying things out. I feel that I'm prepared to take those risks. I'm prepared to engage, which is, after all, where we're always trying to get our stakeholders to. Understanding that this, if you like, forms the basis of our change. This is the model that I now work on. And what I am concerned with is that I understand that any time that we announce change, perhaps we say that the change itself is changing, we announce another change, we talk about further interdependencies we've identified, all sorts of things might be going on in a team meeting, where actually what I'm doing with those announcements, with talking about the results, talking about what we're going to do next, is I'm creating anxiety and stress. That pain that the brain is feeling reduces the available energy for change. Because, of course, pain, the experience of pain is an early warning system that something bad is happening, and our brains will focus on it. If there is too much change going on, what our brains start to do, if you like, is we start to narrow down our focus. The brain chemicals, the neurotransmitters. Neuro is neuron. Neuron is a brain cell. So think about the two neurons firing together. So effectively, neurotransmitters is basically how the neurons, the brain cells, talk to each other. So these chemicals that our brain is producing. One of the things that interests me is something called epinephrine in the US, or noradrenaline in Europe. And it's that chemical which actually produces hypervigilance, because as the changes keep coming down on top of us, actually the people I'm talking to don't have space to listen to what I'm saying, because they are just focusing in on the disaster in front of them. They are feeling so anxious. It's really interesting. In the course, we talk about how what this does is it reduces your sort of your peripheral vision. I never knew that our peripheral vision was about 180 degrees when we are feeling relaxed. We're more on the reward side. Yeah? Actually, I can notice more things. Really interesting that, the brain obviously is processing sight messages and it sort of starts to close down peripheral vision. It has changed how I drive, actually, because before I get in the car, knowing that peripheral vision for other drivers is really important, I actually step back and think, okay, all right, let's take a moment of calm before I start driving, because I want to move more towards the right-hand side of this diagram because it'll actually improve my driving. It's the same as a couple of years ago in another neuroscience course. I understood that hydrated brains actually have about 15% more cognitive function. So one of the habits that I've adopted, I leave for work very early in the mornings, often still very dark. I certainly don't have breakfast at my house before I leave. I creep out before everybody else wakes up. But one of the things I do now is I make sure that I have a bottle of water by the bed. And as I'm getting dressed, I will drink, half a litre of water before I get in the car. Because again, I want that cognitive function to be at the highest possible point. So understanding how the brain works helps you make decisions all the time to act at your sort of your peak. But the thing I'm interested in is as we layer more and more change on top, one on top of the other, I need to break this cycle of the adrenaline is pumping, so there is definitely momentum, but it's coming at a high cost for that individual, the stress that it's coming at. And that hypervigilance means that actually the wider context of, I'm asking you to make changes to your way of working, but in the bigger picture, you've still got a great career here. We still value all of your skills. You're still working with these colleagues, you're still servicing these customers. All of those reassuring messages are based on a wider context. And if you've got that narrowing of context, then you lose it, don't you? You lose the benefits that you can sort of reassure people with. So that's one of the things I've really learned about from neuroscience, is to think about all the time, not talking about leading you through a specific change, but thinking about how do you feel right now? What's going on for you? And how might I shift, to better to be on the right-hand side of this diagram? How's that working for you so far? Are there any, it's very difficult to deliver and watch the chat. Yeah. Oh, yes. I don't know who Fullerton is, but ability to hear is also greatly reduced during stress. Actually, you're right. And one of the reasons is that actually listening, which is what I'm asking you to do right now, is using up the greatest amount of brain processing power. The least amount of brain processing power is when you smell something, although I don't think that's a great deal of help in this webinar right now. But the second least heavy usage is visuals, when we see things. So I've put visuals throughout this webinar to help you with that. So understanding the dangers of you being on the left-hand side when I am trying to help you change. Some of the things that I want to think about is, how do I move you to this right-hand side? What do I need to think about? And I have found this to be so impactful for my change plans, for all of my coaching, for my workshops, everything that I do. You all know that I run, lots and lots of initiatives for different organizations. I'm overseeing lots of different changes. And the one thing that I now use as my success criteria at any intervention is I am thinking, how can I make the experience better for somebody? How can I create pleasure? How can I create a sense of reassurance, a sense of well-being? Because as soon as I do that, if I'm concentrating on the good stuff, I am moving people along this spectrum. And what their brains will do is their brains will be thinking about creating dopamine. Dopamine is, it's a feel-good chemical, but it's very much associated not just with the feel-good motivation, I want to do more, but it also comes with the energy to do more. So every time we get a dopamine hit, something that makes us smile, something that makes us go, I've done that, yeah, then actually we're creating those feel-good chemicals in the brain, really important as a result of learning neuroscience. I've always been a bit of a to-do list person, but between now and 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I have to make a number of miracles happen. I am going on holiday tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I haven't sorted out any of the hotel, anything about the journey. I have a whole load of things I need to do. So this morning I sat down and I wrote the to-do list. And as I've done, and they're really tiny things on there, but every single one of those has basically, as I tick it off, I know what I'm doing to my brain. Because if I stayed in the feeling of you're never going to get this done, I don't finish work until 8 o'clock tonight, minimal. But I imagine it'll be closer to 9 o'clock. And then I have to do all my personal things to get ready for the dog sitter arriving and for me to exit the house. If I look at that, if I stay too long thinking about all the things I have to do and how almost impossible it is, there's more work than there is time available, I will be on the left-hand side of the spectrum. And actually, my creativity will fall. My ability to process large amounts of information will reduce at a time when I need it the most. So that to-do list this morning, and I started at 5 this morning, but I did my little to-do list and I've been ticking things off because every time I do that, it just shifts me a little bit. It changes my brain chemistry. And it's this kind of thing that I want us to know, because I know how important it is in change. I'm never going to find out all of the different change initiatives that people are involved in. So I might be happily sort of talking about, well, we've made great progress on our change, but they're feeling awful. They're so far on the left here because of other things that are happening. I can't predict their sort of context, if you like. So what I can do is I can engage in two things, asking them how they're feeling. So an understanding of neuroscience, I think, really pushes up the importance of sentiment analysis. And the second thing is, even if I can't get to talk to them about how they're feeling, why don't I make an assumption that probably they are very much on the left, because there's lots of things that are causing them anxiety. So whatever I do, how can I possibly make it easier for them? How can I make them enjoy work more? How can I give them some pleasure? And those are the sorts of things that I think is really helpful to have a look at. Anybody got any questions they want to put sort of in the chat there? Anything at all where you're thinking, is this right? I'm happy to take questions at any point. You can unmute yourself if you want to, and sort of put your hand up and tell me you've got a question. I am watching the screen right now. Thumbs up though, if you can. Thumbs up if you think I'm making sense, because it's nice to get a little bit of feedback. What I'm asking you to do right now is to make me feel good. Thank you, Nicola. I saw that hand go up. Thank you, Anita. That's it. You are pushing me to the right-hand side, which will give me the energy to keep going. Yeah. Yeah, there's a good tip in there about reading fiction for 5 minutes a day. It's basically anything that will give you relaxation, Danielle, to be fair. I was on a lecture with Professor Daniel Goleman the other day, and we were actually doing joint breathing exercises. And it was just, fantastic how it really made a change to how I was feeling. And this was 2 minutes of breathing exercises where you're just basically doing deep breathing. Somebody's asked me about people feel numb. How do you get them? Let's talk about what numb really is. And thank you very much. Carmen's put sort of a lovely little face with her sunglasses on. That's made me feel good. So thank you for building my dopamine. I really appreciate it, guys. Let's get back to numb then. People feel numb. What can we do about that? Well, let's look at what numb really feels like. Numb is a way of basically saying, I'm going to take myself out of this. I'm almost, it's a form of denial. I'm going to exit my feelings from this. I'm not going to engage. I'm just going to remain on the outside because I just feel I've been hit by so many changes. I simply can't process anymore. So what we're talking about here is that it's a sort of symptom of what we're talking about is being on the left-hand side. So how do I overcome this? It's the same, to be honest, as how do we overcome any level of negativity? One of the images that I have in my head right now is that what I am doing is, there's this sort of bubbling cauldron of anxiety and stress. And, and it's spitting and hissing. And I want to, it's really hot and it's dangerous because it's so hot. Anything could happen. People could get injured, people could burn themselves. So what I'm thinking about is that everything that I do that brings pleasure just basically pops an ice cube in there. And eventually it will reduce that overall heat. So when somebody's numb, I'm thinking, well, what is it that I can do for them? How can I make their lives easier? How can I take some stress off their shoulders? Now, probably one of the biggest causes of a lot of stress is, how do we make the time for change when we've got so many other things going on? I was at a workshop with a large travel organization, that's probably all I want to say right now, recently. And one of the things we did was an activity for senior leaders about, well, how do you take things off the table? How do you remove work, not just add in new changes? So what is it you can slim down? That's obviously a core piece. If you don't have senior leaders involved, it is a massive issue. But I think helping people to think about, well, how can I find a little bit of time to do this? What can I stop doing? Is always an incredibly powerful way of moving people more towards the right hand side. Resilience is something else as well. Activities which are about reminding people how they've survived before. I myself have been thinking a lot about this time last year, when I also went away for the Easter weekend, and I looked back at the beginning of this week at my diary, from my schedule from last year, and all the things that I was doing. And I remember how I worked right up to the end of Thursday, and I was actually delivering a session for a client early in the afternoon, where everybody else around me, family had arrived, and everybody else around me was having a great Easter, and I was still working in my office, and reminding myself, yeah, but you survived that, Mel. That was hard. I could see everybody. I was in my garden office. I could see everybody having a great time, and I wasn't part of it. And I was feeling really stressed about how much I still had to do. I got through it and it was fine, and we had a great holiday. So I've been there before. It's that reminder, isn't it? You've done it before, you can do it again. So we're thinking about activities that are about coping. We're thinking about activities that are about giving people pleasure. I'm about halfway through the webinar. So what I thought I'd do is basically shift focus a little bit and try to give some practical activities and things that I've been thinking of. Now, anybody who has been on my courses knows that I can talk about this for days. One of the things I'm just going to go through all these activities in just a moment. But one of the things I wanted to sort of say, I'll put it up again at the end of the course. Trust me, all these diagrams will make sense in a moment, is that all of these practical activities, over the couple of days in the Neuroscience for Change course, we do a lot of reflection. We talk about how we can practically apply what we're, these activities to our work. I'm going to share a couple with you. And of course, anybody who's already been on the Agile Change Coach course will know that there's 41 neuro hacks. That's a lovely self-paced online course. So anybody who wants sort of a quick, I need a toolkit, effectively, that online course, every single module there is a toolkit based on neuroscience that gives you, things you can do, things you can immediately apply. So if you can't wait to the 30th of April and you want practical things, then you can download that course this weekend and go, yeah, under control. I do this because I think it's important to have those coping mechanisms. Right, let me take you through some activities then and see how we feel. I think the first thing is to recognize that let me just go back here. We talked about numbness. We can also talk about the fact that anger, some people can get very, very angry about certain changes. And probably one of the most effective, I put some of my favorites in here, one of the most effective activities we do on the Neuroscience for Change course is we talk about understanding when we resist change. Because I think starting with an empathy that actually I'm on the left, because often we are the ones that are implementing change, aren't we? We're the ones that are trying to persuade other people to change. And of course, therefore, our orientation is more towards, oh, this change is a great opportunity for your career. This change is a great opportunity to streamline what you're doing and save time. This change is fantastic for meeting customer needs. So we're all about the benefits and everything. And it's sometimes a bit hard to empathize with those who are going, actually, this change is just going to tip me over the edge. I hate this. I resent it. I don't want to get involved. So a great way to get started really is to think about empathizing, and I find this activity to be so useful. I use it all the time just to remind myself that people have had enough before I open my big mouth and become all enthusiastic too early on. I start from a position of maybe they're not feeling that optimistic themselves. So we talk a lot about Professor Carol Dweck's work of the growth mindset when we're open to change. It's helpful sometimes to think, well, when are you in the fixed mindset and how does that manifest itself? So, in what situations are you sort of thinking, I don't want to do this. I don't want to learn. I just want to get the answer. I don't want it to be a great experience. Just tell me what I have to do and I'll get on with it. Maybe it's some work that you really don't like, you don't enjoy. Maybe it's a fear that you don't have the skills, or maybe the natural affinity with the subject. For those reasons, you're angry, you're resentful. You are certainly not in a position where you're going to go, I'm going to volunteer for this. Let me help make this happen. Do it now as I'm talking. Think about those situations where you feel the same way. I know myself. Marlene's on the call, so I have to be careful because there's loads of things I don't want to do. There's loads of things I'm resentful about. But the obvious one is I've got a new printer. I had to buy a new duplex printer because I am writing a book. I got to 76,000 words this morning. And that, if anybody's interested, that's about 200 pages. So I did need a duplex printer because every now and again you do have to print it out and you do have to sit somewhere quietly away from the screen and just read it through. It's a horrible job. The thing is, though, I hate technology. I'm awful. I don't like change. Never liked change. That's why I was such a good chair of the Change Management Institute, because I can really empathise with people who don't want to change in my own life. And this new printer, I can see it sitting over there right now. Right? I don't want to learn about it. I just want it to work. Yeah? I don't understand peripherals. I think, as one of my friends said, she said, we've got to be really worried. She said, when the machines take over the world, I do hope it's not printers who lead the way. I've never understood the logic behind printers, when they will or will not work, when pages get jammed. I get very, very stressed. So when it comes to that area, I don't bother to investigate. I don't come at it with an open mind. I don't come at with, oh, I wonder how I can make this work. I wonder what functionality I can learn. I wonder how this can make my work easier. I don't do any of that. I'm a boiling cauldron of resentment, and I look immediately for somebody else to help me with it. And I've always been a big fan of, if you've got any technology issues, get a teenage boy on side as soon as you possibly can. I don't have one of those floating around at the moment, so I use my husband, but it's a similar thing. But I just don't want it. I've got a closed mindset. What will encourage me to apply a growth mindset? My husband and I have been experimenting with this since the printer arrived, because I knew I was giving this talk. And we've talked about his coaching, his explanations, his standing alongside me while I try things out, his willingness to dig me out of a problem. Don't know why I've done that. I didn't. And him calmly digging me out of the problem. So I build my confidence and I have achievements and I feel, oh, I'm enjoying the fact things are working a bit better. There's a bit more efficiency in what I'm trying to do. And I can see the meaning of that, how it can help me save time and feel more efficient. So it's thinking, I think there's an empathy exercise we can do here. If we want to bring people along to the reward side of things, first of all, have a think about, get into a situation where you really feel that fixed mindset. Because empathy is about really sort of understanding that feeling. Think about the factors that trigger it for you. And then think about, well, how can I maybe minimize those? I don't know if anybody's put anything in the chat. Oh yeah, they'll only be. I love that comment from Joe. If printers take over the world, they'll only be dangerous until they need a cartridge changing. Craig thinks printers are obsolete and bad for the environment. I couldn't agree more. And I've only printed the book 3 times in the whole time I've been doing this, and the rest of the time I'm on screen. But it has come at a cost. The other day my eyes looked like little pinbricks, and I thought, you know what, I do need to sort of sit there with a printed coming out of it. So it's basically anything that is the blocker, and how might you overcome it. That's something to think about. So the fixed mindset, growth mindset. This activity came out of a concern I have, that too often we either do two things. We immediately talk about our early adopters and working with them, who perhaps naturally bring the growth mindset to their work, to the changes we're trying to make. So we concentrate our efforts on those, which is great. Early volunteerism, early worked examples from those early adopters means we can get others on board. Totally with that. But I think that we sort of, perhaps there's a bit of a focus on those with the growth mindset, or worse, we sort of stand there telling people they should have a growth mindset. I have found this empathy with the idea of what's causing the fixed mindset to be incredibly helpful. So that was one activity that I wanted to share with you, because it's good fun. It's simple to do. It gets people talking, because you can do it in a workshop. Another thing, we've been talking about the threat response and that bubbling cauldron of, I can't cope, I hate this won't work. We did it before and it was a disaster. I really lost out in the last change. I feel like my skills are no longer valid. You get it, right? That feeling of this. So the pre-mortem technique is incredibly important, because what we are doing, if we've got people over on the left, we want to get them onto the right-hand side, where they're seeing change as something that they can cope with, that they're supported during. I'm not going to say it's an opportunity straight away, but I think if we can move people along that spectrum to feeling like that, we always want a little bit of energy. We want a little bit of threat, a little bit of sense of urgency, as Professor John Cotter's always talked about it, that gives people to keep going. But if it's too much, then that's when they sort of close down, become numb, as somebody said. So using the pre-mortem activity, actually incredibly important for ensuring people feel heard, which is one of the ways that we can reduce the pain related to change. Giving people the opportunity to feel, actually, all of these things here, as people talk about, oh, we didn't have the right skills, it was more complex, or last time we had lots of data issues, or there were more interdependencies. We've got the other resources were overcommitted, so it led to delays. New rules were introduced that made some of the change obsolete before we even got started. Suppliers didn't want to participate, they had their own issues. Customers were not happy. All those inside the organization really fundamentally disagreed with what we were doing, and it was an uphill battle. I mean, these were just things I took from some sessions a couple of weeks ago. But by using the pre-mortem technique, we are doing some very important things in terms of how we move people towards the more sort of reward, the more of an opportunity. They're being heard. They are being heard respectfully. So value and respect, when we show value and respect to people, we definitely reduce the perception that this change is painful. And therefore, the neurotransmitters that create that adrenaline and that noradrenaline, the hypervigilance, go down. But also, one of the things that can bring pleasure is a feeling that we're all on the same side, that we've got a common goal. By talking about the fact that we're fearful of things that might go wrong, it gives us a chance to talk about the things we're going to try and achieve. And bringing people together on those common goals makes them feel like, yeah, I'm part of something. It's a way to help us create that oxytocin, that bonding chemical. This is one of the reasons I got you to put your cameras on at the start of the call, and some of you have left them on, because you're part of a community. You can see other human beings. What that is doing right now, I can see Joe and Kerry and the other Joe and Ruth and Katrine and there's Jew there. Everybody's got their cameras on. I'm immediately having a connection with you. I can see you as a human being. I can pick up on your body language as much as you can pick up on mine. And you are starting to feel I'm part of this group. I mean, the whole point of this webinar was to set an environment. We're going, actually, we're in this together. I do the same job as you. We're in this together. I just want to share a few thoughts. And it's that feeling that we're part of that community is creating in the brain that neurotransmitter called oxytocin, which is about bonding and it's about trust. So when we all share our fears together, then we're all part of that sort of common group, that common social group. We have common objectives, we have common fears, then the oxytocin goes up. That moves you more to the right-hand side. So basically, all the time, I'm trying to create the really great neurotransmitters, the dopamine, the oxytocin. And at the same time, I'm trying to reduce the likelihood that we'll create the bad neurotransmitters, if you like. Is that making sense? It has completely revolutionized how I do change. Because everything that I do, every message I send, I think, how is that going to bring pleasure? Or at least bring reassurance? How is this going to be supportive? And you know what? I'm just going to go back to it because it's such an important thing, that whenever I use this, I think about how can I create things like dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin. And it makes me change the words sometimes in my communications, just by changing a little phrase or a couple of words. Maybe just pointing out other groups that we're working with. Oh, I'm part of a bigger picture. Yeah. Talking about a success that somebody else has had is a part of that dopamine creation. Go, oh, I could have that achievement. It's their anticipation of having that achievement that I've just described others have experienced. So everything I do now is all about whatever's happening in my change, whatever's happening with all the other changes coming down on top of people, whatever's happening in the wider context, because we are not just worker bees, we are affected by our home life. I am carrying a huge amount of stress about going on holiday tomorrow because I'm thinking about the dog sitter and getting her bedroom ready for her and all the stuff I have to do. You don't know that about me. Well, certainly my clients didn't know that this morning, so they piled on the work left, right, and centre. But we can make an assumption, can't we, that there's a lot of factors happening that we probably don't know about, but actually are pushing people to the left. What can we do to put the ice cubes in the boiling cauldron? Yeah. So being empathetic about the fixed mindset, which makes you come up with your own sort of support mechanism, all the things that you think, well, that helps me cope. So the things I described about my husband coaching me, supporting me through when I have a go at things, helping me fix problems when I experience them. All of those things, that's the support mechanism that works for any change. The pre-mortem, enabling people to have their say about things they are fearful of, being listened to respectfully, being actively listened to. As they articulate their fears and they are listened to respectfully, and we ask more and we dig in and get more information from them, they feel respected, they feel valued, they feel like their skills, their experience are being recognized, and all of that will produce dopamine and oxytocin. Brings me to something else. Again, I'm just picking out a few things that really change my change plan, if you like. It's thinking about positive feedback. And I think in a more agile world, one of the concerns I have is that we can get ourselves into a vicious circle, because at the top there, we're waiting for great results before sharing feedback. You know, we're waiting for completion of, or I'll tell everybody they're doing a great job when this is done. You know, I actually applied this morning to my builder because the urge to kill him is very strong. I very much feel that where I'm on the left-hand side, I feel anxious where I just look at him and think, I've never met anybody who lays flooring this slowly before. But I thought, no, 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 Melanie, you need to create, you want energy from him, you want momentum, or you are going to kill him. So what did I do? I was all about thinking about the achievements, praising the achievements that he's had so far. So I'm not waiting for him to have laid all the flooring across the upstairs of my house. Marlene, it's not going well. Only one room done so far. So instead, I'm congratulating him on the room that he has done. I'm congratulating him on the fact he's sorted out the skirting boards in the second room. In other words, I'm not waiting for really big achievements, because the problem is, the vicious circle is, because we're waiting for great results, we lack positive feedback. Now that reduces his energy for change. The lack of energy reduces his participation. I don't think it could get any lower, but there's always a chance. That lack of participation reduces the creation of the change. The lack of change reduces the changes of the chances of creating the desired results. You know, we go round. So finding little things to say, that is the secret. And what that has done is I have always blocked out in my change plan, since learning this particular aspect of neuroscience, I have got this list. I'm just sharing my shopping list with you. But what I do is I put in at the end of every day a 10-minute session where I share positive feedback, however small the message. And I also block out on a Friday morning probably half an hour where I do more positive feedback. So any examples of so they're not about things having been absolutely completed and we're going, wow, haven't we made amazing progress? Instead, it's things like, if I see somebody helping somebody else, if I see somebody asking a great question, I will thank them for that. I sent an email this morning to one of my graphic design team because she's working really hard at the moment to produce some new diagrams, which in the end I didn't use in here. But we were talking about them yesterday, and she's drawn some ones overnight. And I went back to her with the honest story, which was, because of our conversation last night, Caroline, it really triggered some thoughts. And this morning I came up with a new diagram. I'll show you in a moment. And actually I was able to write quite a compelling paragraph for the book about this particular subject. And so I've just let her know how she has contributed to other work, you know. So her questioning of me gave me new perspective. It helped triggered insights for me, you know. Or maybe somebody's bringing new examples, or they're doing some work at a very high quality, or they're you know, they're willing to volunteer, or I can comment on the energy and commitment of team members. Those last two, by the way, I'm very cautious about using, because what I don't want to do with feedback is, you know, get into that praising, but because I think sometimes we can send people into a spiral of sort of overwork by doing that. So just commenting on the fact that because Caroline asked some really great questions last night, she triggered thoughts. That isn't about how hard she's working, or that she was drawing diagrams late last night. I don't want to praise for that. I don't want to feedback on that, because I think that can create some toxic positivity that I worry about. How does that sit with you guys? That idea that within the change plan, we actually schedule time for lots and lots of sort of mini thank yous. Yeah. It doesn't matter what they are. I sit there on LinkedIn, I sit there on WhatsApp, I sit there with my emails, but just putting, and Craig obviously loves this stuff, because I know, Craig, you're very good at praising people and motivating your own teams. I've seen that over the years. And it's just making sure that we keep that flow going. So it's a flow of positivity, if you like, putting that into your plan. Easy. And as I said, it has other benefits, by the way, in that it's 10 minutes at the end of the day, and I do that before I go to the car park to get my car. And again, it comes back to the fact that even if I'm stressed, I have, one of my jobs was to focus for 10 minutes on good things. Of course, what that does is increase my own peripheral vision and move me more towards the right hand side. So, you know, small habits, they don't have to be big. Yeah. But it's just praising in the moment, you know. And if you do it as a daily habit, you can catch people in the moment, can't you? I still can't get over the fact that there are organizations that do some kind of annual performance appraisal. I just don't get it. You know, all I could do in an annual performance appraisal is to congratulate you and build your dopamine that day for things that you've done in the preceding few days. You know, neither one of us, if we did an annual performance review, will be able to remember all of your starring moments throughout the whole preceding 365 days. And it doesn't do the brain any good. I mean, I've missed my opportunity to help you feel inspired and energized all the other days of the year. Last one, I'm having a big moment about this, and I'll probably talk a lot more about this in the next webinar I'm going to do for sponsors, or if you're managing upwards, you'll enjoy it. But one of the things I've really learned in looking at the neuroscience, writing this textbook, is that, you know, an iterative plan of any kind for any change we're doing, wave after wave of change. You know, this is how it looks. We have an iteration, it ends with an outcome, a little star there, outcome after outcome after outcome. The thing is, though, how important it is to actually put in time for reflection. Yeah? Before we get on to the next piece of work. And in fact, not just reflection at the end, but actually we should be drip feeding that reflection throughout the iterations as well. Now, the key thing is that it increases perhaps the time taken for change. That's not always an argument that's going to fly particularly well. I was dealing with a startup that's got hundreds of staff, by the way, and is incredibly well funded. But I was talking to a startup today, and they're all about momentum and energy and everything. So this argument is a very difficult argument to make. But one of the things that I just wanted to share with you is it's latest thinking. You know, I always like to bring you up to speed, is the power of reflection. And what I was talking about to some senior leaders was the fact that if you reflect, then and you encourage people to reflect on, it could be the end of an iteration, it could be during a piece of work. Think about, well, what new piece of knowledge, what new piece of ability have we discovered? Because then that makes us think. You can facilitate a conversation about, well, how can we apply this? What difference will it make? And who will benefit? And of course, what that does is it actually drives out the greatest bang for the buck. It's actually ensuring that we're getting real value for money. Because by considering what we've achieved and asking those questions, then what we do is we start to dig out how we apply it. We think about, well, that will make us think about some new abilities. So again, how can we apply? What difference will it make? Who will benefit? If we think about what difference it makes, again, we think about new knowledge. So what difference will it make? How can we apply it? Who will benefit? What can we do now that we couldn't do before? You know, all of these things, it's very hard to create a diagram that reflects just how many times we can bounce around the subject, but you're constantly looking at three sort of factors. You know, how can we apply this? What difference will it make? Who will benefit? And those things will then bounce off of each other again. And by doing that, that reflection is not a soft, fluffy, nice to have. What I am doing as a hard-nosed CEO is ensuring that if I've invested in achieving some small changes, I am getting real return on my investment. Because before we run on and do the next changes, I'm squeezing every last ounce of value out of what we have done. So reflection is something else. Understanding the power of reflection. Reflection, every single one of these answers on here is a dopamine hit, isn't it? Every time we consider how we perhaps have benefited somebody else, how we have made their lives better in some way, we're also creating oxytocin, a feeling of, you know, connection to these people. So again, you know, what we are doing using neuroscience, these simple techniques, every single one of these has the power to create the really beneficial neurotransmitters. So it's always thinking about, actually, how am I going to create that cocktail of the most potent and positive feelings, whatever the situation, irrespective of where somebody is in my change and in all the other changes taking part in them. So it probably isn't a surprise that I'm campaigning for you to come on the neuroscience course, because I think that it absolutely shifts how you do things, and it makes such a difference to how you manage your changes. And I think that, as I've said, I think this is very much the start. Having now almost completed the book, I can see that there will be a piece on sponsorship. There will be, I think there will be a course that much more specifically looks at how we structure a change plan around our understanding of neuroscience. We are only just at the start of how we understand how things work. And I think that all of these neuro hacks, these brain shortcuts hack, all of these techniques that we can use make a difference. It's so powerful. And I think this is we're sort of almost, I think we're future proofing the career. I think we're future proofing the profession of change management. I think it's why I'm so passionate. I don't mind saying that I'm 55 and I'm still learning all the time. And I will say that this has made a significant difference to how I change. But I also think it's made a really important difference, which is it has enabled my change management practice to keep up with the fact that we are now in a different situation to even 5 years ago, when we were managing perhaps a level of change that people could just about cope with. 10 years ago, we were managing a level of change that people could cope with. Now we are not. And so I need different tools, different techniques, and to create a change plan based on those original models, it's just not working. So those are my views. Any last questions, comments? You know, as usual, I've sort of run right up to the piece. If you want to get onto the course, as I said, I just can't run that many. I wish I could run more. I really do, but I've got a full diary right up until Christmas. But Tibby and I have squeezed some in, and I know we're squeezing one in the 30th of April to the 1st of May, those 2 days. It runs 9 till 4 in the UK, and I do have a lot of people from particularly the eastern seaboard who decide that actually getting up at 4 a.m. is a good use of their time. What amazes me is when I have people from the west coast who think the same thing and get up around midnight. But I also have people in Sydney and Brisbane and Melbourne who join the course, even though it's UK time. So there's no excuse for those of us in the European time zone. It's easy for us. I'm going to stop the recording now because I always forget otherwise. I hope it's been useful. I am getting that dopamine hit from all the things you're saying in the chat. I really do appreciate it. If you want follow-up questions, I'm on LinkedIn, but also Melanie at agilechangemanagement.co.uk. But Marlene's in the chat now, and she's I know she's dealing with the bookings.